Welcome, one and all, to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor Rebush. With me, as always, is Phil McKenzie.
Oh.
It's still just the second syllable. Never changed, Phil. Never changed completely, anyway. And boy, was that a crisp second syllable. You know, I still am appreciating that. Welcome, beautiful listeners. Lovely people who support us week in, week out. We've got another one for you, which is essentially the feeling that we had on the last episode, actually. This was Amanda Nunes. In fact, I think I titled it Amanda Nunes versus another one. But it ends up being a momentous occasion to look back on regardless, because Amanda Nunes retired on top. She left the sport. She has effectively sunk the women's featherweight division as a result, because that was a ship with a crew of essentially one woman. And we're going to have a new and I mean, we thought the Amanda Nunes era was boring and frustrating to watch. Imagine women's bantamweight for the next 2 or 3 years. There is a lot to talk about regarding not just Nunes' performance over Aldana, which there's not much to say from Aldana's end, but her career as a whole, her legacy, what she taught us, or what we thought we already knew that she helped us reinforce or not about the women's bantamweight division and beyond. Amanda Nunes is certainly going to go down as an extremely pivotal figure in the female side of this terrible, awful sport that we crave. And we're going to have a lot to say about her career and what she means to the sport. After that, we are going to talk about, of course, the co-main event, Chucky Olives, Beneil Dariush. Phil, nailed it, I think we can say.
As always.
Absolutely nailed it. We never miss a fight like that. And then at the end of today's episode, because next week's UFC card is absolute dog shit, we're going to talk about Bellator 297, I believe. It has a main card which frankly doesn't even outshines the vast majority of UFC main cards going currently. Vadim Nemkov versus Yoel Romero, Sergio Pettis versus Patricio Pitbull in the co-main event for the bantamweight title, Corey Anderson, Phil Davis, and we are going to talk about the bantamweight title fight most of all. We want to talk about Sergio versus Pitbull. We're going to get to that in segment 3. Before any of that, though, back to the start. UFC 289, Nunes versus Aldana. Before we get into the whole discussion of what do we make of Amanda Nunes' career now that it's over, and it seems like one of those retirements that probably will stick. What did you make of the fight, Phil?
Terrible.
Yeah.
Yes. One of the worst she's had. But in fact, not in any way really her fault.
Not at all. I thought of all the one-sided drubbings she's had, this was probably her sharpest. She looked very clean, very clinical, perfectly in control the whole time. It is really all on Aldana, and some of that is not her fault, right? Like the athletic gulf between Nunes and the rest of the division cannot be ignored. But you do have to wonder, you got to look at Irene Aldana and say, what were you planning to do? What was the idea coming into this fight? Was there one?
Yeah, this was just one of those ones where the challenger just came into the fight and was just looking to survive. There's not really much more than that. They were just constantly there waiting for a better version of themselves to step in and help them.
Yeah.
They were like, if I'm still around in the next round, I'll be doing better than this then.
Yeah.
And obviously, 5 rounds went by and nothing happened.
She made some gestures in that direction, right? Like she really tried to psych herself up going into round 4. She's like, I have now accrued enough misery and suffering that I have no choice but to go out there and go to war. And she kind of went to war for about 40 seconds. And then it sort of just became the fight it already was again.
Yeah, I mean, this was actually, yeah, she said it was a good performance from Nunes. She had a lot of, we said that, the easy way for her to win this fight would just be to take Aldana down. And she did that early on. Aldana immediately scrambled and back up again. But it then meant that Nunes was just able to keep both front kicking her and also level changing, and just, I think her body jabs, her body work was nice.
Her jab in general was probably the best I've ever seen it.
Yeah, and just picking her off from range, just soundly outstriking her. It was, in that way, it was like a great performance for her to leave on, because it's going to be here was a fight where she could have easily just out-wrestled this person, and no doubt she could have done. But, even then, this is going to leave an impact on the rest of the division where they're going to be this person's best chance was in the striking, and Nunes still utterly tooled her there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I thought this is about as close as any of these one-sided fights has ever gotten to one of my touchstone masterclass performances. Robert Whittaker, Kelvin Gastelum. It's here's somebody who cannot touch me. They have only crazy man's chances every now and then. I am just going to take them to school. And she did it for 25 minutes straight. Honestly, I think this is basically a flawless performance from Nunes. And of course that is underscored by the fact that there was very little pushback or effective resistance of any kind. But, she has had those fights before. And this was the most clinical and comprehensive delivery of that kind of matchup that she has delivered.
Yeah, I mean, given a completely passive opponent, you might have thought there would have been points in the past where she would have just picked at them, but she did actually kick Aldana's ass.
Yeah.
And so, that's all you can ask for, really.
Yeah. So our thought heading in was that we always try to find comparison matchups. And we looked at the fight with Germaine de Randamie. And we're yeah, she's possibly even worse at wrestling than GDR. And she's not as athletic, but she does have some skills on the feet. She could put some combinations together. A couple times recently, she's shown more interest in being more aggressive earlier. So probably GDR is the best comparison. No. In fact, in part, I think because perhaps that physical component to Germaine de Randamie was more essential than we realized. Classic you and I, Phil. Constantly complaining about how athleticism is cheating, and then still just sort of underrating freak athleticism. No, it was actually a lot closer to Nunes Pennington. And I gotta say, having recently rewatched Nunes Pennington in preparation for last week's episode, Raquel put up a much stiffer resistance than Aldana did here. If Raquel had not gone back to her corner and said with her own mouth that she wanted to quit and created the controversy or allowed her corner to create the controversy of refusing to let her quit, that would not have necessarily been a fight where everyone would have been clamoring for a stoppage. Mm-hmm. It was really her open desire to not want to fight that made it troublesome and worrying. Up to that point, it was just a one-sided fight. This was a fucking beatdown, as you said. This, I felt like Aldana's corner should have stopped it after round 3. Maybe give her round 4, see how much war she can create. At the end of round 4, why see more of this? Just stop it. Who cares? She's not going to win. So yeah, how much more is there to say about that?
Not much. I mean, she just didn't turn up. She did not try and make any chances happen. She landed one big right hand at some point. But yeah, after that was just oh no, I'm not doing that again. And yeah, so otherwise she just got the shit kicked out of her. I mean, it just makes you think yeah, this division's not gonna be cool even after this.
Yeah.
This is, I mean, the bantamweight division is A, pretty much the same people at the top as it was
Yeah.
when Nunes first came to the division. And, like, I mean, like, Yana Kunitskaya, aka Santos, is like the number 6 bantamweight in the world.
Yeah, and she's bad. She is outright not a very good fighter. Yep. So, what's the next title fight look like? Obviously, Irene Aldana, in UFC tradition, is getting in there. She was so impressive with her performance. She's just contended for the title. She's got to get another shot. It'll probably be
It's going to be Juliana Pena Holly
Pena home. Oh no! At least
why would it not be? This was a very easy.
At least do Pena Pennington. Pennington's actually made improvements. Since
Sorry, are you saying you don't have a bottomless appetite for Holly Holm main event? You've got contractually obligated pay-per-views to fill here.
No, I would never say that. My appetite for Holly Holm fights is as bottomless as Beneil Dariush.
Like, I mean, I was thinking that Nunes and Shevchenko going does actually mean something from like a structural perspective for the UFC. Is that like they were basically two people that for a while,
yeah,
UFC could just be like, yeah, we've got 2 title fights on this pay-per-view, buy it.
Yep,
because Shevchenko and Nunes would just be like, sure, I'll fight this person. They're not very good, and I'm going to easily beat them.
Yep.
They were. Many people in the other divisions, have had much slower, like paces of fight taking because the people that they're fighting are good and they don't want to fight them all the time. But Nunes and Shevchenko could essentially roll out of bed and fight whoever, and yeah, that's going to be gone now.
Yep. Yeah, and it's not like either of them was even necessarily a huge draw on their own. They were just
I mean, also like much more than so than pretty much anyone else in their division.
Oh, no question. Absolutely.
That's the thing, is that you would rather watch, rather watch Mighty Mouse against an overmatched challenger than you would watch like I don't know, some people would in the past have rather have watched Mighty Mouse than they would have watched like Brandon Moreno back when they didn't know who he was.
Yeah.
People are not going to care about whatever bantamweight title comes next.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to. Because if it's Pena home, which does seem easily the most likely option, we're going to end up talking about it. So you have to care, Phil. Sorry.
I think the only thing that I'm thinking is that home might be booked.
Whatever. Just redo that. They do that more often these days. Is she?
I don't know.
Let's find out. And in the meantime,
yeah, she's booked to face Mayra Bueno Silva.
Oh, well, we need to see that fight.
Of course. Why not just make it for the belt? Why not?
Yeah, who gives a fuck? Yeah, why not? I did appreciate, that Juliana Pena, she, the title reign was brief, but man, she has such a personality. Not a good personality.
Oh.
Quite the opposite. She seems like an insufferable person, but she is so reliably, toxic in her behavior that not minutes after, Amanda Nunes announced her retirement, Pena was on there online being like, "Oh, you scared out of the division, you pussy bitch!" Like,
Yep.
She could not hold back. All right, well, let's talk about Amanda Nunes' career then. There's not much more to say about the fight. She fainted. Her jab looked better than ever, and it's impossible to say whether she was sharp like defensively because she barely had to try defensively. As a champion, she retires on top. What do we make of Amanda Nunes's not even just her run as champion, but like her whole career? Like, what lessons can we take away? What kind of legacy does she leave behind?
Honestly, like, she is someone who I think has surprised me over the course of over the course of her career. I mean, I think you can kind of twin her a bit with Charles Oliveira.
Yeah.
To a small extent. Being two people who, like, earlier on in their careers, I'd just be like, this person panics when they get into trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're just, just a classic glass cannon. They are not going... This is someone who, like, is probably going to have significant success, might well even become champion at some point, but there's no way they're going to be a long-reigning defending champion. Like, I just wouldn't have thought it of Amanda Nunes. And admittedly, in that early career, she obviously didn't have the training available to her. She didn't have the kind of time or anything like that. These were understandable and explicable losses.
She was not a full-time fighter until she became champion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would have looked at her and I just would have said, never would have thought she would be someone who could just rack up as many defenses as she did.
Yeah.
And, we have talked a bit about, how she had strategic adjustments. I mean, two fighters in the most crude way possible. We laud, like, Belal, remember the name, Muhammad, for often, like, fairly straightforward strategic adjustments. She was able to demonstrate those too. I mean, obviously the difference between her and Belal, remember the name Muhammad, is that he is a tiny, underpowered person in a historically good division, and she is a giant monster athlete in historically and still terrible division.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, like, all those things meant that she's just genuinely been, like, a real surprise. I mean, she's beaten two of the other three genuinely great women's fighters, I think, in the sport, who are Cyborg and Shevchenko.
Yeah. She also beat a couple of the B-tier great fighters of these divisions. I mean, Ronda Rousey, however you look at her, undeniably a massive win, a very meaningful win. Holly Holm and Miesha Tate. I mean, when she won the title, she, both right before and right after winning it, she swiftly defeated all three previous women's bantamweight champions.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I mean, just like someone that I never would have thought of would have had that level of, like, sheer consistency.
Yeah.
And I don't think, as we've said many times, I don't think, and well, we saw in the Pena fight, the original Nunes was still in there.
Yeah.
Because people generally are. People don't. But, credit to her for being able to layer enough different ways to fight over that it was only really exposed once in her entire championship reign.
Yeah, and I've now effectively come down on both sides of this argument, because I was talking to someone on Twitter the other day who refused to accept that there is a pattern in Amanda Nunes' losses.
Mm.
That the Pena fight bore any resemblance to the fight she used to lose before winning the title, even though it's literally those fights. But like, you can't, you like have to bring that up. You have to bring up how much better she is just innately than the rest of the division, how there's this huge athletic advantage. You have to bring up that her adjustments were really very crude and rudimentary most of the time. You have to bring up that, it was revealed actually that she's got the exact same weakness she started with. None of these things are really particular to Amanda Nunes, though. And as you said, like, people don't change who they are at an innate level that easily, if ever. I mean, it's extremely rare for somebody to have that kind of arc and successfully covering it over and finding the right game plans. What I'm saying is, you can't fault Amanda Nunes for not having to have learned more to make her game work as well as it did. Like, it's not her fault the division sucks. And Nunes is a level of athlete and clearly has a degree of, like, developed a degree of professionalism as a fighter and in how seriously she took her job that it's very likely we would have seen a better Nunes if the division were better. Right? Like, it seems like she would have risen to the occasion. It's impossible to say if she would have had that same kind of reign. Probably not, but yeah, like I think it's not her fault that she just didn't need to. You know, like, why would she become like a fucking Volkanovski level technician when she's not in Volkanovski's division? It's enough. And she's just crushing all these women.
I've made this argument about, like, guys like John Jones as well, is that, like, you know, also, if you train against people on your level, if you wrestle hard against people on your level, if you spar and strike and so on, you're much more likely to get, if you build like a comprehensive pocket boxing game, you're going to get punched up.
Yeah.
You're going to lose grappling exchanges. You are going to shorten your career. In some ways, you know, to have a long MMA career in particular, you want to be as bad as you can possibly be.
Yeah.
Without being bad enough to lose against anyone you are fighting.
Yeah. Efficiency. Strategic efficiency.
Yeah, over the course of a career.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it wasn't her fault that she was much bigger and more athletic than anyone she fought. You know, as the great philosopher Fezzik once said, you know, it's not my fault being the biggest and the strongest.
Is that a
in
line?
The Princess Bride.
Is that a line?
Yeah, it's from The Princess Bride. What he says to Wesley when they're having the fight.
Oh, okay. That's definitely the line everyone remembers. From those movies. One of those memorable Princess Bride lines. No, I don't recall that one. Could you do it in the Andre voice? Maybe that'll help refresh my memory.
I genuinely thought about it for a second, but then I want that to be on the internet forever.
I almost got you.
Got too much on me already.
Yeah, so like, I completely agree, and I think you have to evaluate Nunes both in context in both senses. Like, I've never been unbelievably impressed with Nunes to the degree that, like, I think largely UFC marketing wanted me to be. I'm not sure that there was ever a groundswell of fans, really, but certainly a certain segment of people in MMA media, and certainly in UFC marketing, you know, she's the greatest ever. Oh my God, isn't this unbelievable? And I have always been a contrarian when it comes to that. Like, her opponents suck, you know, like, and these fights are terrible. And they're often terrible because, like, she desperately needs them to be terrible or else she might lose. But like, you gotta defend her at a certain point too, because she, you know, like, even Jose fucking Aldo, my favorite fighter of all time, undeniably got more boring as a champion. It's what you have to do to an extent. You have to find, like you said, like the shittiest ways you can get away with of holding on to your title, of taking as much fight out of the fight, because you are taking on just a string of, incredibly motivated and nominally well prepared opposition. And, yeah, like, you have to adopt a more defensive mindset. What's the safest way to win and keep winning? And I can't really knock Nunes for that. And again, maybe those strategies would have been more complicated had they needed to be, but they didn't. That is both for and against her. She ruled over a terrible division, but she ruled over it with a half-closed iron fist. No question. And she didn't need any more than that. There are also...
What else could she have done? Is there...
Yeah.
You know, who else could she have beaten? She leaves absolutely nothing on the table. I mean, and at least partially is, again, the absolutely dreadful state of the division. There's not even challengers in the wings, you know,
No.
If you looked at like a Khabib or something like that, who you might have said left a bit early, where you'd be like, oh yeah, what if they fought the next generation? What would happen then? There's nothing like that here.
Nope.
There's no one There was no one left for her. She did all that she could do.
Yep.
No one you can look, even in the remotely near, even in the remotely near term, was where you'd be like, oh yeah, I'm interested in seeing that person fight Amanda Nunes.
Yeah. And there's even some spicy, like, I would argue, just this side of the fluke performances in there. Like, if you're gonna just critique Amanda Nunes for playing it as safe as she possibly could, for having a fight, frankly, so dreadful with Valentina Shevchenko that it's not even particularly clear she won it because so little happened.
Absolutely not.
That she was like struggling with Germaine de Randamie, and you can, I guess, critique her for like just having to take her down and just having such an obvious avenue to victory. She also fought Cyborg in 35 seconds of the stupidest, most suicidal brawl you have ever seen. And on the one hand, had Cyborg not gotten chinned first, is that exactly the kind of fight Nunes probably would have lost? Yeah. Right? Like, she can't maintain that. And if Cyborg had been able to take her shots or hadn't been hit so cleanly or had just slowed it down but kept up that kind of intensity, very likely, yes, it's in her. That's what happens to Nunes. She is a classic bully, and she will fold when people just refuse to accept her bullying. But she did go in there and swing hammers at Chris Cyborg and knock her the fuck out. So, like, you can't just restrict your opinion on a fighter to hypotheticals. Like, sometimes the chips fall as they will. And in Nunes' case, yeah, she took that gamble then and it paid off. And she didn't take gambles when there was no... I'm not sure how else she would have fought Cyborg.
Also, she didn't have to fucking fight Cyborg.
No.
The other thing is that she went up there and she could have just, again, after Shevchenko was gone, she could, and frankly did, have just mopped up on the bantamweight division until she got bored.
Yeah, and which she did.
She took the only challenge available to her.
Yeah, she said, bring me someone interesting. And I will also point out that, again, an argument I have come down on the other side of in the past, but the Pena loss, like, was that exactly the fights she lost before? Yes. But I also don't think you can overlook the fact that she was clearly at that point extremely bored with being champion. She didn't seem to give a shit, and she got too comfortable and came in very arrogant. And then you see, once again, extremely straightforward strategy, motivation back. I think she carried that renewed motivation into this fight. She wanted to go out on a very strong performance. She looked so sharp and on point and mentally formidable since that second Pena fight. Would Pena have dragged out classic Nunes if she had been like inhumanly motivated for all those years? How are we expecting her to have maintained that motivation? She was fighting a bunch of fucking schmoes. Of course she wasn't motivated. She was beating them easily. So yeah. Amanda Nunes. Is she the greatest female fighter of all time? Probably.
Yeah. Even though, like, all you can say about a fighter really is like, did they do the best they could? And that is all you can say of Amanda Nunes. She fought every challenger she conceivably could.
Yeah.
She beat all of them that mattered. She changed her game plan where it was appropriate. I'll say much more than that. Were they the best fighters?
No.
She just did what she did with what she had available to her.
Yeah.
And as said, did far, far better than I ever thought she would.
Yeah. And you can't ignore that there are some really good fighters in there as well. I mean,
massive career overperformance, I think.
Yeah.
Ended up being a much smarter and more, considered fighter than I ever considered her being. And if she's not the GOAT, then she's at the very least, like, tied up there with Shevchenko. But she beat Shevchenko twice.
Yeah, sort of. Sort of.
Second time, no one won that.
Yeah. Nobody won. Yeah. But yeah, she's up there with Shevchenko. I have in the past mentioned Jędrzejczyk, but as you pointed out, that's probably just because I love her and she's my girlfriend and my wife. I would even say that also deserving to be in the conversation, except I'm going to shoot this idea down as soon as I say it. Probably Rose Namajunas should be in the conversation too. She has a ton of
just for beating quality wins.
Absolutely, she has a ton of super credible wins.
She doesn't have the long period of dominance, and
no,
honestly, Nunes is someone that, you might have expected her to shit the bed if at some point against, even not particularly great challenges, right?
She sort of did against Pena.
I am sure that Rose probably would have done that too, and in fact has.
Yeah, absolutely. No, Nunes isn't going in there and having a fight she's not getting so into the defensive mindset that she's Carla is Rose's equivalent of Pennington.
Yeah. Even that. It was as if she lost, if she lost to Aldana.
Yeah.
Who came in totally psyched out.
Yes.
And then she managed to be as psyched out as her and not doing it.
Yeah. It can get worse. Nunes was not succumbing to any bullshit like that. So yeah, props to Amanda Nunes. It is very nice to see her retire, go spend time with her family, having made, I hope, a sufficient amount of money to at least start something new. And on top, looking at the very end of her career, truly better than she ever did. Just riding that last wave of renewed motivation into two undeniably impressive performances. Even with all the context considered, I think you can't help but just be extremely impressed with what Amanda Nunes did.
Yeah.
Yeah, an all-time great, no question. Okay, let's take a break then. When we come back, the lightweights, Chuck Yalos, Beneil Dariush. Maybe we will also have a chance to squeeze in some discussion of Ige Landwehr, or maybe we'll pop a couple of undercard thoughts over on the Patreon. As I said at the top, we are completely ignoring next week's card, Vettori versus Cannonier. Instead, we're talking about Bellator in segment 3, most specifically Sergio Pettis versus Patricio Pitbull for the Bellator Bantamweight Championship. All of that after this. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it. Welcome back to Heavy Hands. We are continuing down UFC 289's star-studded main card. I don't know why I chose that sarcastic remark for this, the one that everyone who really loves MMA agreed was easily the best fight on the card. Charles Oliveira, Beneil Dariush. And, well, Phil, I know, you must be proud of our pick here, so I'm going to let you lay it out.
The weird thing is that after we made our picks on this one,
yeah,
this was one of those ones where the more time went by, the more I was just thinking,
yeah,
I don't think that was the right pick. The closer we got, and then the start of the fight turned up, and I was like, oh yeah, maybe it was an okay pick to make. And then at the end of it, I was like, oh no.
I felt good about my pick all the way up to the fight. We had Ben Cohn, who I think would have joined us on the show if there had been a lot more grappling to talk about here. As it was, the fight was short, as most of the best Charles Oliveira wins are. But I wasn't seeing it. I was like, yeah, obviously, yeah, Charles got chances. And even after the fact, I don't feel like this was a shoo-in for Chucky Olives.
Oh, no. I mean, you can tell that by looking at it.
Yeah.
But it was more just like, there were basically like just two things that I was thinking about, which is that that dynamic we discussed where, like, Beneil needs to scare people on the feet because he's a big, he's a big loopy puncher, and Charles isn't. And I just increasingly kept seeing Charles is going to throw something straight down the middle and hurt him. That isn't exactly what happened, but it was just a general dynamic of, like, a accuracy and firepower discrepancy on the feet.
Yeah.
Not even firepower, really, just accuracy. But it was also like, one of these men got hurt by Drakkar Close.
Yeah.
So I think that in retrospect, it's just the question of, like, this is the magic of Charles Oliveira, basically, is that almost everyone he fights has some questionable durability problem somewhere, because this is, as we've mentioned many times over the years, such an offensively tuned division. And the fact that he simply has two incredibly powerful phases of submission grappling and striking means that almost everyone he fights is going to, it just cannot match him in one of those two areas.
Yeah, and often that just results in a fight in which they're simply worried about the one area, and it never actually is a practical issue.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, you wouldn't say Justin Gaethje is not durable.
Yeah.
But basically everybody is capable of getting absolutely fucking finished in singular moments by Charles Oliveira. Everyone. He is Charles Oliveira the best finisher ever?
Yeah.
Like, he's going to be in the conversation at the very least when his career is over, right? Best finisher. Like, he is up there as a finisher with the likes of Anderson Silva.
Yeah, I think that's probably his competition, right?
Right.
In terms of someone who got people hurt and then got them out of here.
Yep.
It's Anderson.
Yeah. Truly an all-time great in terms of unstoppable violence. I'll give you my pretty simplistic read on this fight, though. I actually thought it was going fine. I mean, I think there's no question it was going fine. Beneil Dariush, Chucky actually went for like a lat drop or something, and just flubbed it and fell on his ass, which is pretty typical of people's attempts to take down Beneil Dariush. He is just incredibly positionally strong, and off-balancing him in any part of the wrestling to grappling sequence is extremely difficult. And I just thought actually that Beneil kind of gassed trying to beat Charles up too hard from top position. That's kind of what I saw. I thought he should have settled the fuck down. Paul Felder.
He just got hurt.
That too. But when he got to his feet, I thought he was already shaky before he got the head kick and then the blistering follow-up from Chucky.
No, he's one of those guys that's another one of the, Dariush dynamics that make him look like such a sort of struggling journeyman type fighter, is that he is someone who just looks very tired almost immediately in his fights.
Yeah.
I thought he broadly looked fine. He just, it was just the fact that he got clipped, and he got clipped with something that didn't actually, it was admittedly, on the one hand, he was getting head kicked whilst he was, I think, on one leg from his own head kick attempt. But, it was partially blocked. But yeah, he just got buzzed by it, and then Charles recognized that and just polished him off.
Yeah, just rushed him.
We sort of upplayed, I guess, would be the Dariush's physicality in our last episode. But yeah, it has to be said, one thing, he's just never been as particularly durable.
Yeah, we made note of that.
Losses on his resume.
Yeah, we did make note of that. That was always going to be a factor, and this was one of the ways the fight played out. It was, I just think, beyond expending too much energy, I just think Beneil could have worked the position a little bit. Is what I would have changed about his approach. Like I was saying, starting to say before, Paul Felder beat Charles Oliveira from top position he did not do it immediately. It was a question of sustained pressure, of shrugging off threats, which I think Beneil demonstrated that he's able to do. Charles got in pretty quick, in fact, on like an inside heel hook, and Beneil very calmly just spun his knee out of it, put his knee to the floor, stepped out, got back to top position. But the reason that Charles got back to his feet is because Beneil was nonstop trying to posture and throw the hardest shoot-a-box style punches he could.
Yeah, Jack Stack was talking about this on his podcast, I think. He was saying basically like, this was like the Fedor style, Fedor versus Nogueira style ground and pound, where occasionally he was throwing these massive punches, occasionally they'd thud into the mat.
Yeah.
You could hear it but it was the fact that like Dariush was missing all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. A big part of the Felder win was that he wasn't trying to punch him at all. He was just dropping elbows on him.
And he very methodically worked to the point where he was finding them. They were all based on frames, on slowly building posture. He wasn't just like throwing himself into these knee shields and these feet on hips and trying to shuck everything off and come diving in with a super powered punch. I thought Beneil did too much on the ground, frankly. He demonstrated that he did, I think, have the positional grappling advantage we supposed. I just didn't think he exploited it very wisely. Not to take anything away from Charles, who actually landed plenty of shots off his back, and used that to find opportunities to get back to his feet. He didn't just accept guard just because somebody wanted to be on top of him. Beneil just got crazy, up-kicked him, and then he actually had to make a risky choice to sit up into him and rise to his feet while Beneil was trying to pile back on.
That was good to see from Charles as well.
Yeah.
Because you don't know, like, I was thinking, like, come on, man, don't spend an entire round fighting off your back. Mm-hmm. We've seen how this ends.
No, he was there as long as Beneil was actually keeping him there, but he wasn't willingly playing guard. And when he saw an opening, he got right back to his feet and crushed Beneil swiftly. So yeah, for very different reasons, not a ton more to say. This is really just a pretty short and straightforward fight. We saw Beneil realize his advantages without I think fully exploiting them. And we saw Charles realizing the advantage we knew that he had coming in, which is...
We basically said that was, he would be one of the few people who would actively grapple with Charles. That was true. And yeah, we said that if Charles was going to win, it was probably because he was going to quickly knock Beneil the fuck out.
Yep.
Those things were very true. Yeah, it didn't make me super thrilled about the prospect of an Islam rematch with Charles.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're two incredibly skilled, very exciting fighters. But yeah, watching him blow a takedown and then spend a huge amount of time underneath Beneil, it sort of make me feel like, I mean, even like the last fight did not leave me with many questions, to be honest.
No, not at all.
This did not go any way to resolving, to making me sort of recalibrate my thoughts on it.
No.
In many ways, I'd probably still rather see Beneil against Islam than Charles.
Yeah, me too, but it's not going to happen now. No way.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, in general, that is the problem with Islam, is that he is an incredibly compelling champion who I don't think has many super compelling challenges at the moment.
Yeah.
Not for me. I don't need to see him fight Justin Gaethje or Dustin Poirier.
No. I mean,
I know how those fights go. I don't need to see him fight Michael Chandler for the small chance that Chandler may nuke him in the first 2 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I'd watch a Volkanovski rematch, certainly, if Volk gets past Rodriguez.
Yeah, I mean, it's Volk. Or just I wouldn't mind seeing, some of the new generation take a crack. I still want to see that Sarukian rematch.
Yep. Well, they're obviously setting Sarukian up for a run at the title with the matchmaking he's been given on next week's card.
Yeah, that never goes wrong.
That's true.
Take a fight with zero benefit to it. See how, winning it will get you nothing, and losing it will, you well outside your chances to break into the aging clique.
Yeah.
The top 5.
Yeah, but he is very, very likely going to win it. I mean, who else is there? I mean, this is a sort of a thing across more and more of the UFC's divisions. Just the old dudes won't go away. So, like, who is the next generation? None of them have really broken into the top 10 yet. There's Fiziev, is the notable one. Tsarukyan is still relegated to the bottom of the top 10 in the current UFC rankings. He's at number 8.
Mm-hmm.
And then another up-and-comer, Jalen Turner, who I don't particularly care to see fight Islam just yet. He's at number 10. And even below that, it's like Ismagulov, Moicano, like these are all old dogs. And at the top, it's Poirier, Gaethje, Dariush, Chucky, Chandler. I guess Mateusz Gamrot is in there. I have no illusions that he would lose to Islam. I don't think that's a particularly hard one to predict.
It would be he would give him a tough fight though.
Yeah.
Again, I think this is another Jack Slack thing where he was like, Mateusz Gamrot could have a close competitive fight with Khabib Nurmagomedov or a broomstick.
Yes. That's good. Yeah, that is very much the case. Yeah. I mean, I'd rather see Tsarukyan between him and Gamrot as far as like who's going to have a competitive wrestling grappling match with Islam, but Gamrot doesn't, Gamrot is everything has to work to win fighter.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the wrestling threat has to be there to like take you out of your game for anything else to work sufficiently. And it wouldn't take Islam out of his game, and he can't hold top position on anyone, even when he tries, as I think he did in his last fight. He can't manage it. So like, I don't know. He got stomped by Beneil in the wrestling and grappling. Are we really pretending that Islam wouldn't have probably a similar effect as the fight wore on?
Yeah, probably.
Right.
Almost certainly. But yeah, I think this is Islam's problem, is that there's not a lot of super compelling matchups for him in the division.
Yeah.
Actually, because someone who's stylistically similar enough to him has already fought a bunch of them and thrashed them.
Yeah, honestly. Well, good fight. Weirdly predictable, given all the chaos it seemed to promise, but predictable in a chaotic way. Can't complain. Charles Oliveira, best finisher ever? ? Certainly the best finisher in the division. And he is in essentially like the Joe Benavidez position with Demetrius Johnson sitting on the championship, where it's like, how do you justify giving him another shot? Likely that's what they'll do, because I don't know who else there is. But on the other hand, he has literally cleaned out every other action fighter in the top of the division. He's beaten them all.
And yeah, I mean, it's nice to hear the crowd like popping for him.
Yeah, right.
Cheering for him, like he's a star now.
He really is. He said that too. It was quite sweet. I mean, he's a very likable guy too. That's the other thing. Charles Oliveira, very charming. Did you catch what he said in his post-fight interview, by the way?
No.
I really appreciated and respected the attempt at English. I wouldn't even call it an attempt. That's condescending. The effort to speak English, which he did, but I couldn't understand him. But you know what? It's more than I can speak of Portuguese by a long shot. But he said, I think in the backstage interview afterwards, that like he was moved to tears. Like he had to pull himself together on the walkout, because here he is in Canada. He has every reason to think, here's an American, like there's probably a lot of Americans and American sympathizers of various kinds here, and they didn't give a shit about Beneil Dariush, the American. They wanted the Brazilian to win. The crowd was going wild for him from the moment he stepped in there. And he's earned it, man. Like, he's earned a lot more than that, frankly. Charles Oliveira, with his style, with the fights he's delivered, this isn't going to happen, sadly. But he should be a rich man to the end of his days.
He's one of the greatest action fighters in MMA history.
In MMA history, absolutely. Yeah, no question.
Both for accomplishments and just for pure thrills.
There's no one in the sport right now who is as reliably amazing and thrilling to watch as Charles Oliveira. So, yeah, he's earned that respect and a lot more besides. On that note,
of all the action fighters in the top of that division, who might get a match up against Islam. Which I don't think they've got I don't find super compelling because I don't think they've got that much of a chance in it. Charles Oliveira deserves it the most.
That's right.
By a long, long way.
Yeah. And I think they're doing Poirier Gaethje too. So they're probably sorting out another contender right there. But yeah, I mean, who else is there? No one else has earned it, nearly to the point that Charles has. Why not? If he wants it, give him another shot.
What if Conor McGregor beats Michael Chandler though?
Well, that's a good point. Did you see, by the way, over the weekend, he had some promotional bullshit. I don't know, he was selling his whiskey or something, or selling The Ultimate Fighter, or, possibly promoting his Botox surgeon, at some basketball game or something. And they set up a bit where he punches the mascot. Did you see this?
I've seen it passing my timeline, but I have not actually clicked on it.
Their mascot, Bernie, I think. I have no idea what team this is. He comes out with the little boxing gloves. They do a fake little dust up. McGregor punches the top of his inflated head and he falls down. Great pratfall. Good physical comedy from that mascot. And then McGregor stalks over to him and punches the man in the suit square in the fucking face on the ground. The man had to go to the hospital.
Jesus.
The guy's okay. He probably just busted his nose or gave him a black eye or something, but he just walked over and just punched the dude in the face.
He's just the worst.
He fucking sucks, dude. Pull yourself together. Jesus Christ. We're just doing a gag here, for fuck's sake. Ugh. So anyway, yeah, that's another thing to look forward to in the lightweight division.
That's not going to happen. He's still not in the testing pool.
Oh, right. Yeah, that'd be really funny. They do a whole season of Tough, and then he and Chandler just never fight.
Yeah, I mean, the funniest thing is obviously that, Chandler has presumably been envisioning this and bringing it into being through his own power of the secret or whatever it is since coming to the UFC, and it's just going to will be pretty funny if he kind of goes through all of that and has an entire reality TV show tolerating Conor McGregor, and at the end of it, Conor's just like, you know what, I do quite like my roids, sorry, bye.
That is interesting. Secret versus secret. Who can visualize the strongest?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man. So, that's it for segment 2. Let's take a break. When we come back, Sergio Pettis versus Patricio Pitbull. A little Bellator action for you. And we're going to be at least as enthralling to listen to as Big John McCarthy when we talk about it after this. Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are 1 or 2 of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show. Welcome back to Heavy Hands. We are looking ahead to Bellator 289 and the bantamweight title fight between Patricio Pitbull and Sergio Pettis. While discussing this, and of course discussing the unbelievable legacy that Patricio Pitbull has already accrued, and having shown as of yet no real signs of slowing down. I mean, each time the guy loses and you're like, this has to be the end, he comes back and avenges the loss and looks renewed. It occurred to you, Phil, that really the theme of this episode is all-time great Brazilian fighters.
Huh?
Chucky Olives, greatest action fighter ever. Amanda Nunes, greatest female fighter ever. We're going to even set the question marks aside for now and just say that those are two top candidates no matter what. And Patricio Pitbull is just one of the best Brazilian champions ever.
Yeah, and certainly the greatest fighter fighting out of the UFC and MMA at the moment.
Yeah, and has been for a long time. I mean, I'm sure we've looked this up before and been just as shocked, and that only intensifies as his career continues to go on. This man made his pro debut in 2004. He is 10 months away from marking his 20-year anniversary as a professional fighter.
It is absolutely mind-boggling.
And he's still on top. That is the truly crazy. Like, that is an absurd length of time for any pro career. But we have some guys like that. You know, like, I don't know, Joe Lozon was probably fighting that long. These dudes are not even, first of all, most of them never sniff title contention. Most of them never win a title. And most of them, even if the ones that do, or get to that level, they fall off sometime around the 15th year as a professional.
15 years would be good. Like 15, if you make it 15 years, that is damn impressive.
Better than good. Yeah, we know. I mean, the rule of thumb is that the average pro fighter has like 10 good years of like improving and getting better before usually a precipitous drop off. 12 years is like a very good career. 15 years is a phenomenal career. 20 years without being a long reigning champion who has essentially never suffered a loss in that entire championship run that was not swiftly avenged. That is unbelievable. And it's a shame to look at Patricio Pitbull and think, man, I would love to see this guy pitted against even more of the best featherweights in the world. I would love to see him against a lot of UFC featherweights.
Any generation of featherweights, it would have been great to see him watch. You know,
yes.
To see him against. It would have been, the Uriah Faber kind of Jose Aldo era.
Absolutely.
The Chad Mendes Jose Aldo era.
Yep.
The Max Holloway and Conor McGregor, Volkanovski, any era of champions, you could just be like, yes, I would love to see Patricio Pitbull like these guys.
Yes, but it is just as important to point out that featherweight in Bellator is a good division. They have a strong ass featherweight roster, and have for a very long time. You know, like those fights with Pat Curran, like that shit holds up to hindsight scrutiny. Those are meaningful wins against good fighters. Daniel Strauss, very good fighter. You know, even guys like Emmanuel Sanchez, even guys like Daniel Weichel, like these are solid fighters. AJ McKee, certainly absolute blue chip prospect, generational talent kind of fighter. And Patricio Pitbull has beaten them all. I mean, I was marveling at this as we were talking about it, that he had that loss to Joe Warren, which I think sort of set him on a new path as a fighter and forced him to change up his style a bit. Didn't avenge that one. Pat Curran, as we were saying, did that for him. I think
Pat Curran avenged everyone who ever lost to Joe Warren.
Yeah, I think had Joe Warren been Adolf Hitler himself, the beating Pat Curran gave him would have been enough to satisfy a lot of people's lust for revenge. It was that brutal a beating. And then there was the fluke
into the third. Because I found Joe Warren very annoying, but somewhere into the third minute of Pat Curran just endlessly beating him against the cage.
Sometime around the fourth
it's enough.
Sometime around the fourth or fifth knockout that occurred in that one fight, I found myself thinking, he's a human being. Please, won't somebody do something? And then there was the fluke leg injury loss to Ben Henderson. Other than that, and this, to me, this just cements Patricio's greatness, that he has that loss to Pat Curran, he has the loss to Daniel Strauss, he has the loss to AJ McKee. Any and all of these could have been, and would have been for most other fighters, like they would have lost the title, and that would have been it. And they would have struggled to adjust that they had finally found their foil. And every single time, even to last year, the 17th, 18th year, or whatever it was when he lost to AJ McKee of his professional career, he's getting it back against these successive generations of great challengers. So yeah, we're not going to spend the whole segment just praising Patricio Pitbull, but every once in a while we have to remind ourselves that, you know, he's not in the UFC. Doesn't really matter. He is an all-time great fighter and has done an unbelievable job as a super long reigning champion. And that's not even counting the immediate knockout he scored on Michael Chandler to briefly win the lightweight title. Michael Chandler.
Yeah, I mean, so he's one of setting himself up now to be, I think, the only triple champ in an MMA organization?
Probably. Yeah.
Like, the only one to be champion, like in a, obviously it's probably happened in some, you know, some weird org somewhere. But yeah, if he wins this, he would be a champion across 3 different weight classes. And that's the other remarkable thing about him, and yeah, just to get it out of the way, is that he's done this all while being chronically undersized for his division.
Yeah.
He's fighting Sergio Pettis. So it is stupid to go down a weight class when you are 19 years into your MMA career.
Yeah, 35 years old.
I will say that. But he's, you know, the rules don't seem to apply to Patricio.
35 years old, 19 years in, but as you said, he's kind of been like, the thing is, usually this would be a very bad sign to me. But he's kind of been bantamweight sized the whole time. Like, it seems quite realistic that he could make the bantamweight cut and kind of be fine.
As you pointed out before we started recording, he is the same height as Sergio Pettis and has a reach disadvantage. Someone who's flyweight.
Yeah. Someone who struggled to make flyweight, to be fair, but someone who is also not the biggest bantamweight in the world by a long shot.
You don't think of Sergio Pettis as a big bantamweight.
No, not at all.
I remember him fighting like Rob Font or whatever. And then you remember Rob Font fighting like Chito Vera. Like, yeah, Sergio Pettis is not even a big bantamweight.
Yeah. So I think the consensus between us is that we're just gonna kind of assume that Patricio can do it and that he'll look fine at bantamweight. It doesn't seem like a overly dramatic cut. I have to assume Patricio has just been barely cutting for many, many years. I guess that's cause for concern. You know, but fighters cut weight all the time. It doesn't seem like it's going to be too drastic of a change for him because he is a small featherweight. Not a Volkanovski small featherweight. You know what I mean? Volkanovski is thick and heavily muscled and dense. Patricio, you know, is to an extent, but he's not that level, I don't think. So I think we're just going to discuss this fight assuming that he's going to look more or less like Patricio. And maybe all we'll discuss is the possibility of him perhaps not seeming quite as fast as he did relative to the big, slow featherweights. But
I mean, there's always a chance he comes in. There's a chance he looks like shit. Because once fighters do the first time they go to an unfamiliar weight class, you know, TJ Dillashaw is the obvious example. He tried to jump right in with a title fight at flyweight. Sure, that could happen. Just got to put that out there as a possibility. Other than that, this seems like a rough matchup for Sergio Pettis.
It does. Yeah, and I don't think you have to look a whole lot further than Sergio's fight with Kyoji Horiguchi to kind of see why. The difference between Kyoji and Patricio as fighters is largely technical in that Patricio has adopted in these last few years of his career much more of a long-range karate-esque sniping and counter-punching style. He sort of came to it at the same time, as a matter of fact, that I think frequent training partner Henry Cejudo adopted that kind of style. And yeah, that's how Kyoji fights, except that Patricio's cleaner with it. Kyoji Horiguchi is, all told, kind of a mess, technically. I mean, a great many of the punches he throws, often well-timed, very fast, difficult to stand up to, but are completely overswung. Excuse me. And fling him completely off balance and make it entirely dependent on his athleticism, whether or not he can recover to throw again or get back out of dodge. It's the dynamism that makes it work. Patricio, a dynamic fighter, but also a very clean, straight, tight puncher. Great left hook, great jab, great straight right, puts combinations together well, everything very compact, even with the bouncy long-range approach he has adopted. And the story of that Kyoji Horiguchi Pettis fight was that Kyoji was pretty much crushing him until the shocking comeback in round 4, I think it was.
Yeah. I mean, we're essentially talking a fight where Sergio kept trying to come in, and his problem is that he tends to leave his head on the center line when he attacks. And this was a big problem against, say, like Rob Font. It was a fight where he was up against someone who was just much longer and fought longer than him, and he just ended up getting crushed with the jab from basically outside his own applicable range.
And that's true of basically all of Duke Roufus's fighters as well.
And essentially Duke is just like, just be tough enough to get through it. And the problem with against Kyoji was that Kyoji just kept angling off and landing counterpunches on him. And you look at Patricio and you're just like, well, he's just going to be able to replicate that, isn't he? He's not as frenetic. He doesn't keep up the movement to the same extent. That also means that he's, he doesn't get himself into trouble as much. He's not going to be as likely to walk himself into a spinning back fist.
I mean, really, it was Pettis Horiguchi was stylistically quite reminiscent of like Nunes Aldana. Because Sergio couldn't get his head out of the way. He just doesn't have much head movement in his game. And so he was placed in this very uncomfortable predicament of wanting to make things happen, but if he wanted to not get hit in return, he would have to bring his hands back to defend. Right? Because like he's either out of range, where Kyoji is very quick and darting in and out, he can't seem to pin him down, or he's getting into range and then he has to handcuff himself and he can't actually get on any kind of offensive roll. And really, he did, unlike Aldana, he did reach a point in the fight in round 4 where he got a lot more aggressive. He just said, fuck it. Like, Duke Roufus style, I'm going to be getting hit on the way in. I just have to walk this dude down and put more punches on him. He started firing his jab a lot more willingly. Really, he just started coming forward a lot more aggressively in that 4th round, which led to the knockout, which, while amazing, is still very much like the Rodriguez Korean Zombie knockout. Like, when is that ever going to happen again? That was such a bizarre sequence of events that created that one-shot KO. Still very much feels like a fight that Sergio Pettis basically lost. He certainly lost most of it. So yeah, I mean, I don't really see a difference in that. I mean, the other element of Kyoji's win over him was that, he incorporated the wrestling, which is just a further thing to think about. And this is a commonality across most of Sergio's high profile losses. Of course, he had a fight with Henry Cejudo, who I actually scouted Sergio for that fight. So I am responsible for one of Henry Cejudo's most boring fights ever.
Nice. Good job.
Where it was like, I watched the footage, I don't think this guy can wrestle. And then they just, and that's what they did. They picked a dull but extremely effective game plan built on the fact that Sergio doesn't wrestle very well. And certainly not when all of his focus is drawn to the threat created by the hands and trying to build his own offense without just getting hit back every single time he lets a hand stray away from his eyebrows. So, and Patricio can do this too. I mean, I think he's perhaps a less willing takedown artist than Kyoji. I think Kyoji very much has the idea that switch up is sort of essential because otherwise people eventually are going to get his timing, and he's really just a right hand and a left hook. But Patricio doesn't go to it as often because he does not need to. His striking is so much tighter. A lot of his takedowns or time in top position tend to be a little more incidental. They often come off of knockdowns or the opponent like overcommitting and him just sort of out-positioning them and bowling them over. And I have always loved Patricio's approach to top position grappling. Because he treats it like a wrestler. He does not rush to put the boots in and commit to taking the back. He will tie up wrists and keep his weight over the opponent's hips and ride them like a wrestler would. And absolutely he will take the back and choke somebody out if he has an opportunity. He will also, of course, pivot to the front headlock where he has a phenomenal guillotine. But he has a really nice approach to wrestling, which is, I'm going to control you actively and let you work, let you expend energy, and maybe I'll find something while I'm forcing you to fight your way back to your feet. Point being, I think that option will definitely be there for Patricio as well.
Yeah, historically just has been against Sergio, particularly against someone who's just going to be bigger and stronger than him. I mean, the other thing to think about is, I was wondering, is Patricio going to look weird, without the speed advantage that he often enjoys? Because obviously, that's the other side of him being massively outsized against almost everyone that he fights.
Yeah.
Is that he's, generally faster than them. I don't think it will.
Yeah.
Having watched him against Michael Chandler, is that Chandler is obviously a lightweight, but he's also blazingly fast, even, as he's not in his athletic prime.
Yeah.
So that like Chandler tried one of his Chandler blitzes and Patricio watched him and then punched him in the head.
Yep.
Yeah, he's just, you were mentioning this before, he doesn't fight like he is a short person.
Right.
This is something I think that he actually shares with Volkanovski to at least some extent.
Absolutely.
Is that he is quote unquote, he's a short fighter, but he doesn't fight like it. He just fights like a good short fighter.
Yeah, his style is not predicated on the fact that he is smaller. I mean, he knows how to use that to his advantage. He is one of these fighters like Volkanovski, who even when he is not dominating somebody with the jab, he will make them use their reach against themselves. He will use his control of distance to make them overcommit and put themselves in a bad position while undoing their own reach advantage. He will make them come to him, and then suddenly he's in close enough to hit. But he's not somebody who like needs to pressure in, needs to rely on his height to like get underneath threats and like really get after the opponent's hips or whatever. He's perfectly comfortable fencing with much bigger men at long range, using his jab, using his defense, his timing. He's a great counterpuncher. The one thing we did mention before we started this segment was the possibility that Sergio, the definite fact that Sergio is a very different style from pretty much anyone Patricio has taken on before. Sergio at his best is a high output jab merchant who builds lots and lots of different deeply layered combinations off of his jab. And it seems like that would be a good idea because so much of Patricio's game, especially in this latter stage of his legendary career, is designed to wait out people's big overcommitted mistakes and punish them for that. That's where his counters tend to come from. And, what do you do against a great counterpuncher? How do you, beat James Toney? You just poke him in the face with the jab over and over again. You give him a non-committal, long-range, relatively safe strike that even if he can time it, is just functionally a barrier that it's very difficult to get past. So,
and that is the other thing to note about Patricio's career that we've pointed out, is that his pace has dropped quite a lot as he's gotten older, as well it might, and partially that's been enabled by the people he's been fighting.
Yeah.
Because he's not fighting like Daniel Strauss anymore, or
right?
Pat Curran, but just steady pace fighters who he genuinely just had to outwork. He's fighting, the best people he's fighting. He's fighting like Jim McKee, or Michael Chandler. Kind of one punch at a time people who have fed into his tendency to want to be a one punch at a time person. I think this is Sergio's only realistic path to victory.
Yeah.
Outside of, getting a wild KO because the weight cut might suck for Patricio, is essentially to outwork him.
Yeah.
It's that he just needs to land more strikes.
To use what we pointed out is a significant reach advantage despite the weight class change for Patricio. I think he has 3.5 inches on him of reach.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the fact that I don't see how he does that without getting counterpunched, which makes it very hard to pick him.
Yeah.
Sergio is Patricio is just, he's good at hand fighting.
Yep.
He's good at just judging distance. He's a very dangerous two-handed counterpuncher with great durability and, just championship level well-rounded skills. It's the hard to see.
Yep.
How Sergio Pettis gets it done.
Two-handed and subtle with both hands. Good uppercuts, good hooks, good straights off of both hands. I think that fundamentally the issue for Sergio here is that he can try to get on a roll with his jab, but it is going to get countered at some point. And the big problem against Kyoji, again, was the fact that he handcuffed himself by having to pay attention to his defense. So I think the more you can just test his defense, the more you can diminish his ability to overwhelm you with offense of any kind, because the same weapons accomplish both tasks. If he were more like Patricio, more relying on footwork and head movement, then he'd have a much easier time actually putting volume on people. But when they start to hit him, he's got to bring his hands back and stop threatening them, and that can be a spiral for many, many fighters who have that problem, as it was for a major part of Aldana's problem with Nunes last weekend. She just couldn't defend herself and get going at the same time without basically accepting the fact that these exchanges were going to be brutal and terrible and against a much harder puncher. And that's pretty much what the situation looks like here. So, both of us picking Patricio. Hopefully that confidence is not unwarranted. Again, the only X factor is that weight class change, but it's something that cannot be completely overlooked. Because
if Sergio wins this, I won't be unhappy. Again, it's a crazy thing to do.
Yeah.
Being a three weight champion across good weight classes.
Yeah. 20 years into your career does not happen below welterweight, that kind of longevity, even outside of a championship reign. But you made the comparison earlier to Frankie Edgar. I mean, Frankie Edgar was too small for ages. He was not as comprehensively on top of all the other challengers the way Patricio has been for so long. Though he did famously avenge a not a loss, but a draw. But when Frankie finally dropped down and then dropped down again, each time it actually did sort of rejuvenate his career, because it turned out being tiny is a disadvantage no matter how great you are. And if I had to guess, which I do, we haven't seen it yet, I think Patricio will probably look fine at 135. He's a fucking bantamweight.
Yeah. Got to assume it. And he's just a person who's made his career doing crazy things.
Yeah, he rocks. I wish he got more love. Every once in a while you get like a little hardcore celebration. People realize how impressive Patricio has been for so long, but he really should be a star because he's
100%.
He's just an unbelievably good fighter.
Yeah, in some ways now I sort of don't. And now at this point in his career, I don't want him to go to the UFC just because.
Yeah, no.
He physically cannot withstand. He cannot keep this level up.
No, it's
if he goes to the UFC, he will lose to people, and they'll be like, "See, he was never good at all."
Yeah. And I got to assume I assume he's probably pretty well taken care of as a Bellator champion.
I should fucking hope so.
Yeah, right. I mean, it would be.
I'll never assume that about MMA.
That's fair. That's fair. Certainly that they have managed to keep him around for this whole time. And, yeah, I'd like to think that he's doing all right financially. You never know. Okay. Well, that is the co-main event, technically, of this card. Do you want to spare a few words very quickly for the other two big fights on this main card? Not an in-depth breakdown of any kind, but we do have...
Vadim Nemkov against Yoel Romero. Again, Vadim Nemkov looks like he's a very good fighter. He might be the best light heavyweight in the world at the moment.
I mean, Jamal Hill is the UFC light heavyweight champion, so I think that he's a serious contention for actually being the number one light heavyweight.
And Yoel Romero hasn't looked very good.
Yeah.
And so, I'm going to assume that Nemkov is going to win. Corey Anderson, Phil Davis is a genuinely quite fascinating matchup between two guys of similar, who kind of have floated around the same level-ish for ages, but have never quite met.
Right. It's almost a middleweight fight in that I'm sure I've seen it before, and yet I have not.
Yeah, I mean, genuinely, I'm quite interested in this one. I think it basically comes down to how brave Corey Anderson is.
Yeah.
He can stick his way inside the pocket, and not just, have a all the way outside kickboxing match with Phil Davis, where Phil Davis can just, kick him a few times every now and again. I think he just outbox him. But, again, a genuinely fascinating one.
Yeah, I think it depends on his willingness to pressure Phil, probably. Which Corey has done at points. I mean, it's not exactly how he approached Nemkov. I don't think it would have made a lot of sense to be so reckless against Nemkov. Maybe it doesn't against Phil Davis. I mean, I don't know. Trying to swarm Phil Davis does create the possibility of tying up with a very strong, very high-level wrestler.
No one has ever really successfully grappled Corey Anderson, have they? I'm trying to think. This has traditionally been a dreadful way of fighting him, right?
Yeah, that's actually pretty true.
Including he absolutely kicked the shit out of Glover Teixeira, who tried it.
Yeah, that is a very good point.
It's really hard to out-wrestle him.
Yeah. Phil Davis, though, I mean, who would have thought that with the style Phil Davis was in the process of developing when he was still with the UFC, that would just make him such an enduring, he's such a bizarre, awkward technician as a kickboxer. Still, he has undoubtedly gotten a lot more comfortable and cleaner and more efficient. But he's almost like, I don't know, he sort of feels to me what Czech Congo was for a very long time in the UFC. Just never really all that impressive. But just incredibly difficult to look good against. And for all that Yoel Romero's Bellator debut against Phil was not an impressive Romero performance, I thought it was pretty solid from Phil Davis. He just doesn't let rounds slip by.
Oh, he's just someone who's just worked very hard at MMA despite not being really a natural at any part of it apart from submission grappling.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Fortunately, as that's sort of happened, it does seem that his ability to be a cool, weird submission artist has disappeared.
Absolutely. Well, he never had much of a natural
headspace that he used to have with like funky chimeras and stuff.
Yeah.
With just like had to set it aside in order to devote so much more of his brain to like really awkward kickboxing.
Yeah, and he never really had a very natural link into his grappling game, did he? I mean, that was the critique of Phil
I still
Davis.
had to argue with people that said that people were like, well, you see, John Jones has such a natural link. I was like, at least Phil Davis is trying. At least Phil Davis has level change attempts and setups and things like that. He's just a fundamentally awkward dude.
Yeah, and he's been stuck in like the early days Aljamain Sterling phase of his style forever, where like what he wants to do on the feet has never given him a natural follow through into what he wants to do on the ground. And those two seem more disparate than ever before, if anything. Do you have a tentative pick with very little thought given to it? We're going to be wrong even about the ones we did think hard about, so go for it.
Yeah, why not? I'll take Corey Anderson, you know?
Yeah, I kind of feel that too. Corey has shown a willingness to be a savage maniac in the past, and I mean, what's Phil going to do? Knock him out?
Exactly. Without like power in the pocket, Corey Anderson's just perfectly willing to, you know, as in power coming back at him. Corey Anderson is perfectly willing to just sort of hang inside and throw a bunch of punches.
Yeah.
And yeah, Ryan Bader was able to do that to Phil Davis, albeit he did it with more power and less volume. But yeah, I kind of feel like as long as Corey just stays in punching range, he should be fine.
Yeah,
It'll be close, ugly, and weird.
Absolutely, yeah, but fascinating nonetheless. Okay, well, a very strong Bellator main card coming up. We will hopefully get a chance. We're definitely going to get a chance to talk about that after the fact next week. What else are we going to do? We're going to talk about Cannonier Vettori and Arman Tsarukyan versus Joaquim Silva. Yeah, I don't know. Otherwise, coming up in the future, we have... it was a good main event on top of a pretty underwhelming card. Refresh my memory.
What?
The next UFC event after Vettori Cannonier. That's right. Josh Emmett versus Ilia Topuria.
Oh yeah,
which also has Amanda Ribas versus Macy Barber. Pretty solid fight. That's coming up on the 24th. So we will also get a chance to talk about that one in preview form next week. And until then, oh yeah, Twitter, Evil Guard Jackson, Boxing Bush, you know the drill. If you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.